My name is Liz Knox, and today's date is Friday, November 3rd, 2017, and I'm here with Dr. Elainie Lillios, and I'm going to let her open up this interview and talk about her current residency, her current positions, and we'll get started with that. Good morning, Dr. Lillios.
Good morning, Liz. Thank you for inviting me to speak with you today. It's really a pleasure to talk to you about composing and creativity and electroacoustic music and how all of those things come together for me as an individual, as a professional, as a teacher, and as a woman in the field. So it's great to talk to you. I am professor of composition and coordinator of music technology at Bowling Green State University in Ohio. And I am also the director of composition activities for Splice Institute, which is a summer program at Western Michigan University that focuses on composing and performing electroacoustic music.
Excellent. Well, thanks so much for taking time and doing this interview. Really looking forward to learning more about you and what's going on. So I've kind of devised this interview with a form, which we love, right, of past, present, and future. So let's start with the past. General interview questions, but how about your general background? How about let's start with education. What's your early education?
Sure, thank you. I think the most interesting aspect of my education is how I ended up in electroacoustic music. It's not a field that you don't go to grade school and say, oh, I think I'm going to be an electroacoustic music composer.
Exactly.
School, especially at the time I was in grade school, young people were playing flutes and clarinets and trumpets. They weren't composing, and they were not playing electroacoustic music. So the most perhaps interesting part of my background is the fact that I had a neighbor down the street, a neighbor gal down the street when I was young, who was taking organ lessons. This was back in the 1970s when organ was all the rage.
Right.
And I went and heard her. It was a Lowry organ with the curved keyboard and all the colorful tabs that you could push that did things. It had a built-in rhythm section, and it had the big, long, curved pedal board. And I heard her play that organ, and I went home. I said, Mom, I want to do this.
Nice.
I want to play the organ. And so I started taking organ lessons, and I think that it is through being an organist that I came to this appreciation of timbre and of the sound of sound and of the power of sound. Because when you sit behind those big pipe organs and you play all those keys and you think about Ligeti's Volumina, there's a lot of power in that kind of music, and I think maybe I just was on a power trip. And there's also this amazing challenge of having multiple things happening at a time when you play Bach three-part inventions on the organ, or you start playing more complex music. Both of your feet are going, both of your hands are going all at once, and so there's a mental challenge. So there's the beauty of the timbre, there's the power of the instrument, and then there's the technical challenge of playing 3, 4, maybe 5 things at a time. Maybe one hand is doing 2 things, another hand's doing 1 thing, and both of your feet are going, that you really have to challenge yourself. So that's maybe the most exciting aspect of my background, is that I started life as an organist. One day I went to my organ lesson, and my organ teacher said, Lainey, today we're going to compose. I was 11. And so, when you're 11, you just say, okay. She started teaching me about music theory, and the first thing she taught me was about antecedent and consequent phrases.
Interesting.
She composed one line and said, okay, now you finish it. And we went through a whole series of sort of theoretical studies, but composing little pieces, and my first piece was an organ toccata. And so from there, I progressed through as I got older. When I played some other instruments in high school, but I continued playing the organ and composing. And when I finished high school, I went to a summer camp at Oberlin. Oh. Back in the day, it was called MIDI. It was a MIDI summer camp. Now I think it's probably called something much different, and I think the summer camp is still going. And I started playing around with synthesizers and took that was my first electronic music, introduction to electronic music. And so when I went to college, then I decided that music technology, electronic music, electroacoustic music was something I really felt a connection to through the organ, I think, through synthesizers. Sure. And so I started doing analog tape manipulation and then went to modular analog synthesizers. This was in the 80s. Then to computer programming, and eventually then onward into the things that I have been doing over the last 20 years.
That's incredible. You wouldn't think so much about organ as a child, leading to that, but the synthesis part does make so much sense, and that's a wonderful description. So I love that. That's great. Talking about your education and going into that world, did you find that you were one of the only females in your program at the time?
Well, as an undergraduate student, there were other women composers, but they were primarily writing acoustic music. As I moved on into the master's level and to doctoral studies, there were still some women in my doctoral program who were composing electroacoustic music, some who were only acoustic composers. I think that I was fortunate in that there were other women students when I was a student. Mm-hmm. I never had a female mentor as a young composer, and there were no composers on any of the faculties of the schools I attended until I went to the University of North Texas, where mm-hmm. Cindy McTee was teaching. Oh. And at that time, and I'm still sorry about this, I've told Cindy McTee, I'm so sorry I never studied with you, but I never studied with her. At that time, I was composing exclusively electroacoustic fixed media works. I wasn't writing any instrumental music, and she's really an amazing instrumental composer and large ensemble composer, and has done some wonderful things that I really admire, and I regret that I couldn't somehow find a way to make that happen. But she has still been in through her music and through her professionalism and the interactivity that I did have with her, she has been a role model for me. Even though I didn't ever take those lessons, she still taught me a lot about composing and about materials and about professionalism and style and class. So she was a fantastic role model for me at the University of North Texas, despite not having that one-on-one connection.
It's nice to be reminded that we can learn from each other, in so many different ways and still be an influence, even maybe when we don't know it. So that's incredible. Fun question. Albums in high school. What were you listening to when you were in high school?
Oh, in high school?
Yeah, I know.
Oh, boy, that's a terrible question.
I know. That's very personal.
I was in high school in the 80s, and so it was all 80s music. I listened to a lot of popular music. Mm-hmm. I listened to a lot of pop music. I listened to Pink Floyd, I listened to Rush, I listened to Yes, we listened to Van Halen, we listened to REO Speedwagon, and Ozzy Osbourne, and goodness gracious, I'm trying to think of who all we listened to.
Well, we're in the same generation pretty much, so that's why I feel comfortable asking that question. I listen to the same things, and I think it's important. I like looking at people's past and seeing what were you listening to when you were younger, because it has to stick, So yeah. That's great.
Six, Chicago, and then all that sort of 1980s music that now we sort of shake our heads about. and NXS and
yeah.
all of that whole genre, New Order and Depeche Mode, all of that sort of world of things. I listen to a lot of that.
When you're talking to your students, do you ever talk about the popular side of music? Sometimes it gets left out of electronic music, but we're starting to kind of chat about some of the influences and how how that sort of shaped music in the popular. So it's an interesting topic still to me, but yeah, so it's a deep topic, I think.
Yeah, that could be a whole conversation unto itself, I think.
Yeah,
and,
yeah.
We certainly can talk more about that if you'd like.
Oh, yeah, no, I was just kind of curious, about that. So, yeah, so let's move to the present. So how long have you been at Bowling Green State University now?
This is my 18th year at Bowling Green State University. I started in the year 2000. So this Bowling Green State University, Bgsu, was my first job out of college. So I came straight here from the University of North Texas.
Interesting. So, some people that see this presentation will probably maybe on that same path, working on their PhDs or their graduate degrees and thinking about that career search. How did you come to find Bgsu? Did you know about the position through advertisement, job search, or word of mouth?
Mm-hmm. Well, I joined the College Music Society when I was a doctoral student. This was in the late 90s, and at that time there was internet.
Right.
We had the same kind of easy access to things. It's amazing how much things have changed over the last 18 years. There was no music theory composition wiki where you could go to that site and see all the listings. You had to find things through either the Chronicle of Higher Education or through the College Music Society and a weekly music vacancy list. And so I'm fairly certain that the way I found out about the Bgsu job was through the music vacancy list. The interesting story about Bgsu is Bgsu has an annual new music festival that brings composers, young, emerging composers, and more well-established composers from around the United States and sometimes from Europe every year for 3 days for a festival. And I was very fortunate that I was a guest as a doctoral student in 1996 at the Bgsu New Music and Art Festival. I had a gamelan. I have a piece for Javanese gamelan that the gamelan ensemble performed here. And I remember coming to Bgsu thinking, this place is amazing. It's new music, and it's new music all the time, everywhere. The new music seems to be really infused in this community. I would love to get a job here.
Aww.
And so a job came up in 1998, 2 years later, and I applied, and I was still a student, so of course wasn't looked at all. Then a second job came up in the year 2000, and I was very fortunate to then have my wish somehow come true, which sounds a little corny, but I was here in 96, and I said, this is a fabulous place. I would love to be part of this environment, and now here I am, quite a few years later, having been here now for 18 years. So
that's excellent.
Sometimes, they say you should be careful what you wish for.
Yeah.
And I wished for something that ended up being a really great fit for me, and new music is still as strong as ever here at Bgsu. We just had our new music festival a couple of weeks ago. I just was in a meeting this morning. We were doing sort of a recap about the things that we thought worked and what we're going to plan for next year already. So
excellent. So do you feel like that you were fresh out of school, so do you feel like there was an ingredient that landed you the job at Bgsu? Do you think you had a little something to offer that the other candidates may not have?
That's a very good question. I think that I can't really answer that because it would be maybe not wise to try to guess what the search committee had in mind.
Sure.
I know that there were many candidates who applied for the job, and I also know that I was not maybe their first choice. You know, when you take a look at all the people who apply for a job and then there's some top tier of people, sometimes it takes a while to find that person that you think is going to be the best fit. And the person who is the best fit maybe isn't the person who has the best career, or maybe isn't the person who has the most music or the most of this or that. Sometimes it just has to do with their particular skill set and how they come into that interview, you know, how they relate to you and your community.
So apply again, right?
apply, but I think there are many things when I look back on the process, the doctoral process, that I did right. There are many things I wish I had done differently. But if I were to give people advice, you know, if that's what you're saying, well, okay, how did you do it? You know, how did you get stuff? I was ABD when I was hired, which is a very rarity right now. And I would say the way that I got the job, I worked very hard as a doctoral student. I was not as compositionally productive as I wish I had been or should have been, I think. But the pieces that I did right, I was fortunate to have them played on national festivals. I got my music out. I had performances on festivals. I had a few seats. By the time I applied for the job at BG, my music had already been published on some CDs. So I had already started building that professional career. I was already on that trajectory of building a professional career and becoming known in the field of electroacoustic music as an emerging composer. I had also spent a year in England studying with John T. Harrison at the University of Birmingham, and that connected me with a whole network of people in Europe. So I was also having international performances during that time, which set me apart maybe from other people at my same career stage that I had. I was getting performances at national events in the U.S., but also having performances in Europe.
Excellent.
So I pushed my career. I worked very hard to make connections and get my music played. We started an organization at North Texas when I was there called Texas Computer Musicians Network. We used to run out to different places doing electroacoustic concerts. You know, we made it happen for ourselves. And then I also, so that was then a way that I could say that I was giving to the community, which is service. So you think, you know, teaching, research, service. What are universities looking for? Those three things. How am I building my teaching portfolio by being a teaching assistant or trying to get some part-time positions somewhere? How am I building my professional career as a composer by writing music, getting performances, getting publications if I can, or giving papers at professional societies if I take a research track? And then service. Am I in any national? Am I a member of a national organization? Am I in any clubs? Have I started any endeavors myself? How am I looking outside myself? That's the package.
That's gold. All of that is incredible, and exactly, you know, it's what we need to hear, what we need to be reminded of. So thanks. You want to talk about what's happening at BGSU right now? You want to talk about current programs, projects, anything particular that you're really excited about in your own career?
Well, I'm in between projects right now. I do have some things that are coming up that I'd be happy to talk, that I will talk to you about. First, I want to tell you about the project I just finished, which is a piece for saxophone, percussion, and fixed media, which is a little bit different for me in this day and age, that I composed for the Bent Frequency Duo. This is Stuart Gerber and Jan Baker, who teach at Georgia State University. They commissioned the Barlow, this is a Barlow commission, so Jan and Stuart got together and said, Elainie, we want you to do a piece for us. I said, all right, let's do it. And so we applied for a Barlow and received it, and they just premiered my piece last month. They did 4 performances on a tour and gave a performance here at Bgsu, and so that was a very exciting process and project with them, that we were able to work together, so long distance, and then sometimes together, to create a piece that for them that highlights their unique performing abilities and their, you know, their connectivity as a duo. So that, I'm coming off of that one. So now I'm starting to ramp up into my next projects. I work with percussionist Scott Deal, who teaches at Indiana University, Purdue University, Indianapolis, which is a mouthful in Indiana. He and I have done 2 projects together, and we're just embarking on our 3rd project, which is going to be a short piece for my former colleague, Roger Shoup, who passed away. It'll be 2 years now. Roger had an idea to have all the composers write a piece for him, all the Bgsu composers write a piece for him, based on instruments that could fit into a suitcase. He called it the suitcase piece.
Oh.
And he became ill and he passed away before we could do the project. And I talked to Scott and I said, Scott, I still really want to do this project. He said, Elainie, let's do it.
Oh.
So I got together with Scott in August and we pulled out a bunch of instruments in his basement and we experimented and explored, and because we don't know what Roger was going to put in the suitcase. So we just picked instruments that, not a very small array of instruments, and that's my next project. And then after that, and at the same time, I should be, but I probably will kind of work at the same time. I'm working on a viola piece for Kurt Rohde, who teaches at UC Davis. He's asked me to write a piece for him, viola and live electronics. And the percussion piece will also be percussion and live electronics.
Wow, that sounds
Those are the projects.
Great.
There's a big list of others, but
yeah.
those are kind of in the front at the moment.
That's incredible. It sounds exciting. So we're kind of already delving into the future, I guess. You know, but going back, you know, to talking about women composers in music, and now really interested in electronic music, and seeing how do you feel about gender acknowledgments in music? Some women say, I don't, you know, want to talk about that as much as just talk about being a composer. But do you feel it's important to just acknowledge some of the struggles or that maybe women have experienced in the world of composition?
I don't know.
I don't know either.
I think for the people for whom it's important, it should be important.
Yeah.
I think that for people who think that that's an important thing, that we should acknowledge that. I have never been someone on the forefront of being very vocal about being a woman. I think that being a woman has great advantages. And that's both a benefit and it can be a problem.
Yeah, it's a tough topic. I'm with you on that side of been a little hesitant sometimes. I don't think of myself as always just a woman composer, just trying to be a composer, you know. But
right.
At the same time, you know, you read and hear stories and you might have your own personal experiences. And so, you know, it's, I agree with you, for whom it's important. I think, yeah, it is something at least to acknowledge. So,
I think being a composer is a very difficult job.
I agree.
And I think that for myself personally, I want people to appreciate my music for its sake, not because I'm a woman.
Yes.
I've been over the last number of years, for the last 22 years. The first time I heard anything about this gender issue in electroacoustic music was at ICMC 1995 in Banff. Someone got up and gave a paper and talked about how there should be special categories for women, or that their music so that we could create greater gender equity at things like ICMC or Seamus at the festivals, the national and international festivals, to gain greater representation by women. Someone gave a whole paper about this, and I was outraged by it because I thought to myself, I understood where this person was coming from, but at the same time, my position is, if my music is not good enough, because it isn't good enough, I don't want to receive some sort of special exception or special consideration because I happen to be a woman. Either you're going to play my music because you want to play my music, because you feel it's valuable and should be heard, or you don't. And if your reasons for not playing my music are because you want to play music by men, then I'm going to say, I don't want to be part of your club anyway.
Absolutely.
You go at your little, do your thing, whatever you do, and if you want my music because you want my music, that's great. Let's make it happen. Let's do it. Let's enjoy the fact and appreciate the fact that we are all different people, different composers. I went to Seamus in 1998 and I met Bibi Baron. And
really?
She was a very sweet, amazing, wonderful lady. And I visited with her a little bit. At that time, I was composing acousmatic music, and I was composing music that was very gestural, and it was very aggressive music. And in some ways, I think my music remains somewhat aggressive in that regard. But the piece, this little electroacoustic piece that I had, it was very, very aggressive, and there was a lot. It was very powerful and aggressive. And I remember talking to her after that concert, and she said to me, well, that's not the kind of music that women should write.
Oh, my.
So when you start to open this can of worms about the inclusion of women, we have to be very careful on how we manage that, because everyone has preconceived notions about what music is, what music should be, who should be doing what, who shouldn't be doing what. And when you start to probe into these biases that people either have on the surface or have below the surface, you can come up with some very surprising things. I simply smiled and said, well, that's okay. Here is someone who was a pioneer in the field.
Wow, yeah.
Said, you shouldn't be writing. That's not the kind of music that a lady should be writing.
Sure. What a story. And, bringing up this topic isn't so much always about just women in music, but there's always some sub-stories like that, that eventually addresses other issues that, it doesn't matter if you're a woman composer, there's just still some issues in there that sometimes surface, and it's really fascinating just to bring those to light. And, but I think it's important to also surface that a lot of women will say, I don't want to be thought of as a woman composer. I want my music to be good. And I think that's really important to highlight that, women, yes, women are trying to be, they're still pioneering and trying to do, push above, but it's not because they're women. It's because they know and want to do their craft well. And I think that's really great. It's a great thing to bring to the surface, So, which you did. This is excellent. Yeah, it's great. So you talked about not having a lot of women, direct women mentors in your life. Wikipedia lists approximately 350 to 400 women on their list, and you're included in that list. And
really?
Yeah. So do you feel that list is this is a hard question maybe, do you think that's a good representation of women composers, and it kind of fills the gamut, or do you think that there's just a huge insurgence that list could double, triple, quadruple right now.
I don't know.
I know. Yeah, it's an interesting thought to me.
I would have to look at the list, but I don't know. I can say that when I was an undergraduate student, the first female composer that I learned about was Elaine Barkin, who had come to Northern Illinois University when I was a young student. She came and did master class and met with us. She was fabulous. But the first electroacoustic composer, female, I didn't know there were any women electroacoustic composers out there until I found this CDCM series of compact discs, the Consortium to Distribute Computer Music, which I later found out was distributed by Larry Austin at the University of North Texas, where I ended up doing my doctorate. But there was this, I went to our music library and I found this CD series, and on this CD series was a piece by a composer named Pauline Oliveros called The Lion's Tail. And I went in there, I had my headphones on, because that's what we did at that time. You have to listen in the music library, right? And I listened to that piece over and over and over and over again. I think I was 19 or 20 years old, and I thought, this is amazing. And this is a lady. Because I didn't know that there were women composers. I mean, I suppose in the back of my mind, I knew there had to be some, but I didn't know who they were. And I think now the world has gotten smaller. We know each other. You know, technology has allowed us to connect in ways that we didn't in the past.
Yes.
And so I think that we have better connectivity with each other. We can meet each other. We can have Skype visits. We can learn about other women. We can learn about other composers, period.
Right.
Any composers. You know, we can go to Score Follower in Shipitsify and look at their scores and listen to music. Our access to new music, to media, to people is a kind of access that we never had before. And I hope that as this access evolves, that we begin to learn more about other people in the field, other women in the field, other people in smaller represented communities, underrepresented communities, and that we find ways to embrace them and learn more about the creative things they're doing.
Absolutely. That's beautiful. So we talked a little bit about the future. You just had a festival at Bgsu that I wanted to attend so badly.
We did?
Yeah. I know it just passed here, but do you want to talk about next year, or is it too early to even plug for next year?
Well, I think it is a little too early. I'm not sure what the dates are yet. And I do know who our featured composer is going to be, but I'm not sure that I'm at liberty to share that information. I don't run, the New Music Festival is run by our Mid-American Center for Contemporary Music. And the director of that center is Kurt Doles, my colleague. And so I don't want to take away I don't want to steal his fire.
Sure.
But he is already cooking on next year and planning hopefully some really great things. This year we had Steve Mackey and Sarah Kirkland Snyder. It was the first time we ever had two featured guest composers, and they happened to be a couple. So it was great. Two of them here with our community. We had a number of other guest composers who came as well. There was a very nice representation of people that came this year.
Yeah, it looked like an incredible lineup. It was just awesome. I hope to make it next year. That's why I was plugging for that. So yeah. So for your program at Bgsu, before we close, do you want to why don't you tell us about what programs? I know you mentioned it in the beginning, but what programs are available for students if they're interested in studying at Bgsu?
Certainly. Thank you for asking. Bowling Green State University, we focus a lot on new music. That doesn't mean that we sidestep all the classics, but new music is something that we really do very well here at BGSU, and we have a wonderful, vibrant composer community. Anywhere between, usually we average about 25 composers who are spread out between undergraduate and masters. We also have a doctoral degree with a focus in composition that is a new music. We have a doctorate in contemporary music at BGSU. So you can come to BGSU at the doctoral level and study performance, conducting, or composing, one of those three. And the focus is new music in all three of those areas. Our student composers are a great community. The undergraduate students begin in classes together so they can build that community, and they all compose the same projects. And then at the junior, senior levels, they study one-on-one applied lessons. Next week, we have the Toledo Symphony coming to BGSU.
Incredible.
They come every fall, and they read student orchestral works.
That's excellent.
We have 5 composers here at BGSU who are going to have their orchestra pieces read by the Toledo Symphony Orchestra.
Wow.
Next week.
What an opportunity. That's incredible.
And every year along with that, we have a guest composer who comes, attends the reading session, and then does a master class with those students in the evening. So in the afternoon, we do the reading session, we go to dinner, and then in the evening, this featured guest does a master class and talks to our students about their pieces. This year's guest is Andrew Norman, who is coming to us, which is going to be great to have him here. But the 5 students who are having pieces played next week, I believe it's 2 undergraduate students and 3 master's students. So people who would say, oh, well, I'm an undergrad, I could never get into that reading session. That's not true.
No.
Every year, one or more undergraduate students are part of that cohort that have those pieces read.
That's amazing. Yeah, that's
very exciting.
Very cool. Very cool.
On the electroacoustic side of the fence, we have a residency program here at BGSU called the Klinger Electro-Acoustic Residency, KIR, we call it. Every semester, it's a competition, an international competition, where composers make an application to come and work in our multi-channel. We have a 10.2 multi-channel studio with a first order ambisonic cube.
Excellent.
People apply with a project proposal to work in the studio for 2 weeks. And so we right now have November 17th is the next deadline for spring. So we have had some amazing composers come through, and we just had a 5-year celebration of the composers who have been here for the Klinger residency. The 8 former residents came back. We had a multi-channel concert. They gave workshops.
Wow. They
met with our students. We hung out. We did a concert at the Toledo Art Museum. So there's a lot going on here at BGSU. There's a lot going on. I've got students working. We do a micro operas. I've got a student working on an opera right now. Those will be done in January.
Oh, that's a whole other interview, the future of opera, right?
I can't talk about that.
I know it, yeah. That's great. Well, it's so exciting to hear about so much going on. Those of us from the Midwest, we love to hear what's happening in the in between the no coasts, and so that's just excellent. Is there anything that we haven't covered together that you'd like to address before we wrap things up?
I do have 2 other things I would like to say.
Excellent.
If that's okay.
Oh, absolutely.
One thing I want to say is going back to this idea of being a woman in the field of composing and in the field of electroacoustic composition. And I just want to take a minute and I want to acknowledge all of my mentors who helped me get here. None of which, except for Cindy McTee and Pauline Oliveros, all the rest were men.
Yeah.
And, not once did any one of them ever say to me, oh, you're not going to be able to do that because you're a woman. Or they never even made me think that I was a woman. I was just another composer. And so I had some wonderful professors at Northern Illinois University who mentored me and taught me about experimentalism. I think another big reason I'm here now is because I went to a place that embraced experimentalism. I studied with Tim Blickhan and Jan Bach and Robert Fleischer, all of whom had come from the University of Illinois in the Sal Margarano days with this, and Herbert Broom with this super experimentalism. And they were amazing mentors to me. Joe Pinzeroni, who taught me electronic music, and the late Harry Castle. And then Jim Phelps later on at Northern Illinois University. I went to UNT and I studied with Larry Austin, who was great, and John Christopher Nelson and Joe Klein. And then, of course, Cindy McTee, Tom Clark, they were great. I studied with John T. Harrison at the University of Birmingham. And I continue learning lessons from those people and from my colleagues on a daily basis. They all inspire me. And none of them ever said, you can't do it or you shouldn't do it. So I think kudos to all of those mentors for never making gender an issue. Mm-hmm. It was never an issue. So I really appreciate them. Then the other thing I want to tell you before we part company is a complete non sequitur, which is that there is this amazing summer program that I'm involved in called Splice.
Yes.
Institute. It is a week-long summer program for college students who want to learn more about electroacoustic music. Performers and composers. So there are 2 tracks, but it's one big community where the performers are coming to learn more about performing using technology. The composers come and learn more about composing using technology, and the composers write pieces that the performers play then at the end of the week. There are workshops, there's concerts, there's community events. Last year we did a laptop ensemble. This year our theme is improvisation, so we're going to focus a lot on improvisation. And our guest composer is Sam Pluta, who's a part of the Wet Ink Ensemble and teaches at the University of Chicago. And our featured guest performer is Dana Jessen, bassoonist of Wet Ink Ensemble, who is known for contemporary bassoon performing. So we have another exciting year that we're cooking up for everybody at Splice. And anybody who wants to get more into electroacoustic music, certainly that's a great place to come and explore all the possibilities of composing and performing with technology.
That sounds amazing. Well, you are definitely in it and busy as always. It's been such a pleasure. And thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule for this interview. And it has just been a wonderful hour. So thank you again.
Well, thank you very much for thinking of me, and I hope we'll visit again, and I want to hear some of your music.
Oh, absolutely. Very, very soon.
Please send it to me.
Okay. All right, great. Well, thank you, Dr. Lillios.
Thank you very much, Liz. Have a great day.
You too. Thank you.